Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbie Cottrell, Director of First Impressions at Tedstrom. Welcome to our webinar series, Tedstrom Talks. This is the second webinar in our series, and we're excited to present to you our Channeling Your Inner Garden, Native Plants and Pollinator Gardens. We're happy you have joined us. We would love for you to participate and ask questions through the Q&A icon that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. So you're welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar and the presentation, and there's also going to be a Q&A at the very end. I'd like to introduce you to Amy King, our VP of Advocate Service. Amy is a veteran in the financial services industry with more than 28 years experience in insurance, banking, investment management, and financial planning. Amy, please take it away.
Thank you, Barbie. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you guys could join us today, this afternoon, for our exciting webinar on channeling your inner gardener. And right now, I am channeling Peter Tedstrom as I am doing this Tedstrom Talk today. So welcome, and we're really glad you're here. I know that I am very excited to learn some more about gardening. I have a small patch out in my patio that is just bare dirt right now, and I am excited to start planting some stuff. Unfortunately, I have the brownest thumb in the world. So I'm hoping I can get some really great information today from our guest speaker, Nicole McCrorie. Nicole is actually a really good friend of mine. She is my esthetician. I've known her for many years. She is a master esthetician at Serenity Salon at Five Parks. And you might wonder, well, what is an esthetician doing talking about gardening? But Nicole is actually a master gardener as well. Nicole took over a pollinator, well, not a pollinator garden, but a local Arvada garden. Several years ago, she got interested in it, and her passion for it just exploded. And she just talked about it all the time and was so excited. And I'll never forget when she told me that she was going to be a master gardener and started taking the master gardener classes, and she was just over the moon excited about it. So she's recently graduated from that program, and I couldn't be more thrilled that she agreed to do this talk with us today and tell us a little bit about how we can improve our gardens, what does a pollinator garden look like, and how we can, really just benefit from gardening. A couple of interesting statistics actually about gardening is that it is the #1 hobby of retirees. So if you're on this webinar and you're retired, or maybe you're just not retired, but you've been spending a lot of time at home due to the circumstances and are starting to channel your inner gardener, it's a great opportunity to learn some stuff and to do that. And also, gardening is really good for our health. So those who garden, at least moderately, are 2.5 times more likely to age well and age healthier over the long run. So lots of good benefits for gardening. So Nicole, welcome. And why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this Master Gardener plan?
Thank you, Amy and Barbie. Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole McCrorie, and I got involved with gardening several years ago. It started when I was actually at work, and I met this lady named Jessie Standard. She is a master gardener, and she had told me about a garden that she was taking care of. At the time, I thought to myself, how does one even get involved in such matters of gardening? Because backlog is that I always knew that I wanted to garden. It was something that I've been doing research on for a long time, but never had the interest to pursue it furthermore or knew the right people. I don't have a backyard space where I live. Anyway, so I was talking to Jessie about the garden, and I asked her, well, Jessie, how does one get involved? And I think at the time she thought that I wanted to participate, which I kind of did, but I wasn't sure where to even start or if she was looking for some help. Well, I told her I would go and check out the garden, and I went over there. And of course, when I got there, I didn't know what to expect or what it was even going to look like. And when I got there, it was kind of a disaster, if I had to say a word, because it was overgrown with lots of crabgrass and bindweed. It didn't even look like a pollinator garden. I didn't even really know what a pollinator garden was.
Yes.
And
What is a pollinator garden?
a pollinator garden is a garden that supports the ecosystem, whether you have vegetables growing or if you want to bring in other pollinators like different butterflies. It does support bees. So it's just good for everything, and it's pretty and it's low maintenance, especially in Colorado where we are prone to drought conditions in our soils. So if you plant things that are native and once they're established, you don't have to give them a lot of water. Yeah. Well, and back to Jessie, at the time, I knew it was a lot of work, and I said to her, well, I have my boyfriend, and he's muscle, so let me bring him over. And that's pretty much how we got started with her. And that's what I'll be showing you today, the restoration to present of the pollinator gardens at the hills of Stanley Lake Park.
That would be great. Before we jump into your presentation really quickly, though, on the Master Gardener class, how did you get signed up for that? If people were interested in pursuing that, where do they start?
The Colorado Master Gardener, there's two programs. There's the Master Gardener Apprentice program, which is a volunteer-based program, or you can pay the total charge or whatever for the class, and it's like $550. And it's pretty much, you apply for it like a job you would, and you can do it through the Colorado Master Gardeners Extension, so it's CSU extension.coloradostate.edu. You apply online, and they have several counties, so depending on what county you live in, you do it through your county, and then they interview you, and depending on how many people apply, it comes down to a actual physical interview, and then they pick people and they accept you into the program. So in Jefferson County is the county that I live in. There was 27 people that got into the volunteer program, which we got done and completed in the early April. But because of the COVID-19 stuff, they've closed everything. So we can't even do our volunteer hours right now, which will be 50 hours that I have to complete. Hopefully we'll be done by November.
And you've been volunteering at the Arvada Pollinator Garden, or I can't remember, the Stanley Lake. It's a long name.
It is a long name. Jessie picked that name. And the Pollinator Gardens at the hills of Stanley Lake, I have been volunteering there as a steward of the garden for 3 years now. And I just have Sundays. It's pretty much the day that I go. I get up early and I'm there for several hours, especially in the peak of summer. You could get there at about 6:30 in the morning and leave by 10 before it gets really hot. We were there yesterday from 1 to about 4.
Very cool. Well, great. Well, why don't you jump into your presentation? You can share the screen and look.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome to the restoration to present of the pollinator gardens at the hills of Stanley Lake, which is located near Alkire and 84th, which is southwest of Stanley Lake, if you're familiar with that area. It's on the border of Westminster and Arvada, Colorado. Winter 2018, this is Preseason garden. This is pretty much the garden that I walked into when I first began volunteering there. The pollinator garden at the hills of Stanley Lake was established in 2012 by local volunteer gardens to support Rose Roots Garden and Star Acres Farm. The picture here to the right where you can see the fence line, that is where the Rose Roots garden is, and that is a community garden. They have over 100 plots. Good news is that we completely sold out all of the plots this year. It's really exciting. The south side of the pollinator garden is where Star Acres Farm is located.
So if people don't have a garden at their house, are there other of these community gardens around where they can buy a plot or rent a plot, or how does?
Yeah, definitely. As I said earlier, depending on the county, I'm not super sure about like where exactly all of the different gardens are in the different counties. I know in my county there's several different ones. This is a small one. So you just kind of have to look up pretty much on Google. That's where I would look to find if there's one near you. But because, yes, you can definitely get plots. Over the past couple years, I know that this particular garden struggled with getting people in. And however, this year is completely different. I don't know if it's from everyone in quarantine and now it's like, I got to go garden now. I can grow my own veggies. Yeah. Well, this is spring of 2018. This is when the initial restoration began. Up here, or let's see, the left bottom picture where you can see all of the overgrown crabgrass and different native grasses, but completely overrun the entire garden. And this particular garden had been dormant for at least, I think, 4 years. And without anyone taking care of it, this essentially just is what happens. And the upper picture, you can see that we took a manual tine and we had to dig through all of this because they put landscape fabric in the entire pollinator garden, which at the time we didn't know why they did this. And it's meant to control weeds, but if you're putting it into a pollinator garden, this will pretty much inhibit any type of growth, or if you want to propagate, you can't get anything to happen because of the fabric. And now over these several years, as you can see in the middle picture, all of the fabric is beginning to show, and we had to pull all of that out in order to bring back this garden. Upper right picture, that was after we removed all of that grass. And we broke up this garden in sections because that took us probably a couple different weekends to do it. And then on the bottom right picture, we planted black-eyed Susans and I'll forget what this one is right now, but I'll be able to tell you what it is when we go on. Creeping plumbago, that's that one. Furthermore, the upper left is the before picture, so this is a different section of the garden. The upper right is after. So after we took all that out, then we manually tined everything and eventually went back with a motorized tiller. And of course, the bottom left is during and the bottom right is the debris pile. And you can imagine that we have so many debris piles everywhere. And the city had to come and take all of this stuff out. But don't use fabric if you want to have a pollinator garden. It's pretty much only supposed to be used if perhaps you have an area where you want to use as a dog run or something, where you don't want weeds or any type of life to grow at all, but otherwise don't use it. Jessie Standard is a master gardener and lead volunteer of the pollinator garden at the Hills of Stanley Lake. After several years of lacking volunteers, The pollinator garden was overtaken by weeds and native grass. During spring of 2018, Jesse met Nicole and Tyler and began to bring the pollinator garden back to its original beauty. And Jessie is the lovely lady in the upper right picture with the white t-shirt, myself and my boyfriend Tyler, and below is us with Gina, and Gina is one of the original co-founders of Rose Roots Garden and the pollinator garden as well. Summer 2018, restoration continues. A lot of hard work is going on, but I wanted to be able to show you guys kind of some of the good beauty of all of the hard work. And the left picture is the vegetable garden, which is taking off in this picture. The middle picture is those newly planted black-eyed Susans that came back, or didn't come back, they were blooming in the summer. And the right is before and after comparison of the milky butterfly milkweed. So again, that whole area was actually just filled with crabgrass and fabric. Some of the plants that were initially planted there did survive, and we had to take a lot of the fabric out and from underneath it as best that we could. But this was a space that we could just kind of start over. So we started with the big chunky soil down to where we tilled everything and replanted little baby butterfly milkweeds. July 2018, the progress and bounty. Now we've gotten quite a bit of the fabric removed and the garden is coming back to life, as well as getting some of that bounty from our garden, our vegetable garden, because we definitely have that going as well. The great before and after picture. There's this beautiful flagstone pathway throughout the garden, and you couldn't even see it at first, and we brought it back. Now it's like popping. You can see it really good. The pollinator garden originally had fabric placed to deter weeds, and when the fabric is placed in gardens, it inhibits the growth and propagation of the cultivated plants. This not only stunts plants' growth, but was fatal to some plants in this garden. 90% of the fabric has been removed, but the other percent, the 10%, is left due to the roots embedding into the fabric. Once the fabric was gone, the plants that were left could multiply and reproduce. After initial restoration, many of the empty spaces, as you saw, were replanted and they now thrive. With the fabric gone, the increased water retention and aeration allows the roots to become more established, which is important in early stages of plant growth. It took 3 months, April to July, to remove the fabric, weeds, dead plants, trees, and rocks. And as you can see from the pictures, it took dedication and hard work to bring this garden back to life.
So, Nicole, yeah, that is a pretty impressive picture where you can see the flagstone was basically covered up by all those plants or weeds or whatever else was growing in there. And then to expose all that is fantastic. You said that it took you from April to July to remove everything. So then what's good plants to be planting in July, or did you wait to plant some of those, or were those just leftover still that were surviving in there when you removed the other stuff?
Yeah, good question. We planted some things. The black-eyed Susan and the creeping plumbago, those were planted early enough to get them started. A lot of the first year was just initially cleaning a lot of that stuff up because when you do plant towards the end of the summer, now you can, but you have to make sure that you're paying attention to it more so than in the beginning of spring, because then you have the whole spring and the whole summer where you're dedicating a lot of time and paying attention to these plants. And the reason why I say that is we actually adopted some plants from my sister-in-law. She had, I don't even remember what the name of it was, but they had a lot of it in their yard and she just wanted it gone. And she gave us some of it. We planted it in September. I think it's dead. And because we didn't go out there and water it, we didn't pay any attention to it, and it wasn't getting any water in the winter. So if you, it's right now is pretty much the best time, or even like early spring is the best time. And then that's why you notice how at the end of season, all of the plant stores, everything starts to go on clearance because they want you to buy those things, but the likelihood of them living is not that high. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, next one. We made it to the fall in 2018, wrapping things up. That middle picture just gives you a great visual of the outcome of the first season. And fall really is a time that the pollinator garden thrives, especially from like July and August and September. So you can have literally flowers that whole summer, from early spring into the end of fall. It's especially if you plant them, like plants flowers that are early bloomers and then mid bloomers all the way into summer. And then you're supporting those butterflies at all different seasons as well as the bees.
And so mostly are you planting annuals or perennials in this?
These ones that you see in the picture, they are perennials. Most of them are perennials. We don't have too many annuals in the pollinator garden. We want them to come back every year. Something I wanted to mention in the right picture here, you can see my two little dogs. We always bring them. But the flower that you can kind of see in between them is the black-eyed Susan, the orange and red ones, and then the creeping plumbagos are the purple ones. And those were just those babies that we planted that spring after we cultivated the soil. As well as the butterfly milkweed that were planted, and the ones that you saw were babies. That's the one that's kind of the biggest. I don't know how to describe it. It's like little sacks hanging here. But those were like just tiny little babies. So one season of growth is a great start to any pollinator garden. Yeah. Whereas it takes several years. Like now we're entering our third year. We're looking at least another maybe 3 to 5 years before it's even considered an established pollinator garden. So we have a lot of work left to do.
But it still looks beautiful right now, just how it was. That's great.
Yeah, just from that one season. This is the veggie garden tear down and soil amendments that we did in the vegetable garden. That season ended. Of course, we manually did this with a tine and added different soil amendments in there and compost. Of course, we did not go through the master gardener. This is pretty much amateur stuff that you're seeing. We're still learning, but this particular pictures, we didn't really know what we were doing yet. It was just fun.
So even if you're not a master gardener, you can still learn how to garden.
Absolutely. You just have to be willing to get out there and get your hands in the soil. As this was pretty much my first season trying anything with gardening. The most experience that I had gardening up to this point was growing indoor plants. I was pretty proud of that. I still am. I have about 40 plants in my in my house.
Yeah, I can attest that you have a green thumb because you had lots of pretty plants in your house.
And that's the cool thing with a brown thumb is that if you grow native plants, you don't need to pay them that much attention once they're established.
That sounds perfect for me.
It has been an amazing journey completing the restoration of the pollinator garden at the hills of Stanley Lake. Check out what happens next. Spring forward into 2019. Went over there just to shoot some pictures to check out everything, and as you can see, the vegetable garden, there's nothing there. It's just soil from the previous winter. Well, yeah, the previous winter, I guess. And of course, here's a cool little fact about being a gardener. You can plant from seeds, you can start from seeds, or you can go to the store and buy the baby plants. There's no rule that says you have to do it a certain way. Jessie always planted her plants that were already grown. So she would just go to the nursery and buy a bunch of stuff and plant it right into the soil after the first frost, whereas we like to grow them from seeds. Totally up to you. Now, we don't have much space where we're at, so if your space is limited or not, you can always set up an in-home greenhouse like we did in our spare bathroom. Now we're upgrading. My boyfriend is currently making a double-stacked shelf unit. He got an idea, and he just started making it a few days ago to where we can have a two-tiered shelf. That way we can grow more things. And right now is a great time to plant the cold season plants, spinach and carrots and beets, onions, leeks, things like that can tolerate a little bit of a freeze in the soil. Whereas your tomatoes and your peppers, you don't want those to go in until after the first frost. Whereas if you remember last year, we had that big snowstorm after Mother's Day. So we lost a lot of our vegetables that we originally planted in the garden, but we had more, so we just planted again, but still, every year's different.
And so for most vegetables, you can plant them in the early spring and then you harvest them in early fall.
Well, for instance, the spinach that we have growing right now, it'll probably be ready in a couple weeks. We planted that stuff in the beginning of April. This year, I had so much time to be in the garden because of the quarantine. Working at a salon, and I also teach yoga part-time. I'm not working, so I have plenty of time to be at the garden right now. That really helped being able to have all this time on my hands to be out there. So I've got spinach coming up already, and I can't wait to eat it.
But with starting now, let's say I wanted to start next weekend growing some vegetables, what would be some vegetables that you would recommend now as a good time to plant?
Now, when you say you want to grow them, are you thinking of seed or just already plants that maybe you buy at the store, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Which way would be best, do you think?
Really, whatever you find is more easy, or what time you have. And pretty much you can, after this weekend, which is Mother's Day, it'll be safe to plant technically whatever you want. So whatever you like, really.
Okay.
What do you like to plant? I myself love to plant beets. So I already have 3 rows of beets going, and then once most of them are ready, I'm gonna plant more so that I can have a second harvest closer to the end of summer. So in this way, I'm trying to get 2 harvests. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If you plant all of your early stuff early, then you can have vegetables sooner, and then they're staggered throughout the summer.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hello, sunshine. In the early spring, some plants' maintenance requires trimming. These plants in this picture, black-eyed Susan, red yucca, and creeping plumbago, are trimmed in the early spring. Some plants, however, require pruning in the fall, such as echinacea. Leaving foliage on echinacea through winter increases the chances of root rot and other disorders. It is important to leave the seed pods over winter to promote reproduction. During the winter weather, the seed pods will detach and disperse, preparing them for the spring. The dead foliage left on untrimmed provides vital shelter and food for local insect populations. The more diverse and hospitable the green conditions or the garden conditions are, maintained the insect populations are retained and increased over time. And we learned this about the echinacea actually this season. We have been leaving the echinacea every year since I've been there. But we've come to this point where we're kind of like looking at the plants, like how do we take care of this plant? So we get on Google and we're doing a Google search and pulled up echinacea, and it said to cut back the echinacea in the fall time. So now we know that. Trial and error. Once established, pollinator gardens can be a great asset to any landscape. Springtime is the perfect time to plan out which native plants would be best for your area. To best suit your local pollinators, try and select plants that bloom from early spring into late fall. This will provide valuable nutrition throughout the season. Native plants require less water and adapt quicker to environmental conditions. This will save time, money, and water, the most valuable resource. Native plants are adapted to local insect species and pollinators. Some plants are so highly adapted, only one insect can pollinate them. Native plants often have a reputation of being boring and bland, but when selected correctly, can provide equal beauty with a thriving ecosystem to support it.
One of the things that we talked about, Nicole, was how you select these plants. How do you know what are good plants to put in your garden, and what are native, what are good native plants, and how should you, plan your garden?
Yeah, definitely. I would start first by, there's a website that you could go to, and it's called Colorado Native Plant Society, and that's CONPS.org. And they have a great information there, like it shows you different pollinators, especially like different kinds, like it. And to start also is selecting where you want your garden. Is there a space in your landscape where you live that maybe you want to spruce it up? Does it have a lot of shade? Does it get a lot of sun? How will you be able to water it? Those are the first things that you can do. And there's hundreds of native plants. I don't know all of them. I'm still learning them and which ones are best for what. And then that way there's just a wide variety of plants that you can choose from to start with. I also, for websites, I used this year American Meadows and Nature's Seeds. They have a lot of selection of native plants that I was looking for. I could tell you those. They are Scarlet Globe Mallow, These ones are little pretty orange and red ones. These are great. They're drought resistant. These ones prefer a lot of sun. And they also bloom in August or April to August.
So yeah, the bloom cycle, so that's nice.
Yeah. You may have noticed already that there's tons of bees out or dipping around and looking for pollen. In my county alone, there's 30 types of bees alone. And a lot of them live in the ground as well, which is interesting. I had no idea that bees lived in the ground, but they do. Summer 2019, together is our favorite place to be. And since we're talking about bees, the picture with the sunflower, and you can see we put a little beehive, bee house. There's those bees that I mentioned that live in the ground. Those aren't honeybees, and they usually live solitary. They need lots of places to put petals and leaves and grasses. And once you have a little bee house, which you can find them anywhere. Heck, you can get them on Amazon, but you can also make them. You'll see them at local nurseries, all kinds of places. And how you know that they're using it is that those holes get filled with different debris. We just put them out last summer. I went up to them recently, and quite a few of the little holes are filled with stuff. It's cool to see that they're using them. In the vegetable garden, too, we've got it going on here. We built a little fence around it last year. Now, our veggie garden is pretty exposed. It's right in the open. It's adjacent to a trail, so we get tons of traffic of people walking by, lots and lots of dogs. And even though we tell people that we built this fence for the rabbits, it's really for the dogs. We'd have footprints in there a lot, so we had to build something to keep them out. I wanted to share with you the how amazing it is to get vegetables, your own homegrown vegetables. There's nothing that describes this. It just feels so good. And if you remember from that picture I showed you earlier, how bare that soil was compared to now where we have a full-grown veggie garden happening right there. This was pretty much our first garden that we did. The previous summer, it was Jessie's garden that we just helped her take care of. But this, in 2019, she let us take over for her. And of course, we didn't have a lot of experience. We were just in it to try to grow stuff. Midsummer, it's kind of that tipping point where your interest dies out. And I say that because you get through that spring and everything's growing and it looks beautiful. And then it's like, well, do I have to go over there and water it? Maybe it's okay. I don't need to go. But what happens is, in this case for us, a lot of our vegetables became overrun with insects. We had insect problems throughout there because we are keeping it completely organic. We're not using any pesticides at all because we don't want any of that to get onto the pollinator garden, which is 20 feet away from this.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions, and one was about water. So is that garden irrigated, or you guys would water it by hand every day?
This particular garden is actually on a sprinkler system through the city of Arvada, locally. So yeah, if you don't have sprinkler system, and we actually want to upgrade it to a drip system, that would be the best way. And because after we've gone through this Master Gardener program, we've learned that a lot of the problems come from the soil and the water. For instance, a lot of the vegetables, if their leaves constantly get too much water on them, I mean, as you know, with tomatoes or not, too much water on their leaves can create more of a fungal type of problem. So they tend to like their water from the soil. So you could do a drip system, sprinklers, water by hand. All of those things are options. We turned on the sprinkler system last Wednesday for this particular space, and how we do it is we run the sprinklers Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday at 5:30 in the morning for 10 minutes. And that's it for the vegetable garden. We're trying to figure out exactly how much water we want to put in there, because with Colorado's soil, we tend to have heavy clay soils. And that means we just have to water less frequently. But when we water, we heavily get the soil wet, but then we don't water it for a couple of days again.
That was really good information. Thank you. And also another question that came up was, do you fertilize your soil? And if so, with what?
In this particular garden, all we have done is, trying to think of the word. We've done compost. We're trying to just keep natural decaying matter. So for instance, from the previous summer, whatever's kind of left in there, we let it die and then we turn the soil into it. I mean, we take some of it out. But no, we're not fertilizing it with anything in particular. No, not at this time. And that's honestly just a personal preference. I don't have anything per se against fertilizing. I think we might throw some manure in there eventually, but if you're going to do manure, you want to do that more like in November at the end, like when you're done, and then you let it sit all winter long, because you don't want to throw manure in there and then plant stuff, because then you got all that bacteria and it's just gets cross-contaminated. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good information.
These are just more pictures of the summer from the pollinator garden. Of course, this is after the restoration. This is pretty much the garden in its beginning stages. The right picture is a baby yucca. And the cool thing with yucca, they draw in hummingbirds. So if you want to attract hummingbirds, plant yucca. The other thing with yucca is that they actually grow natively in Colorado, but a lot of them are disappearing because of all of the new construction going on in here. So if you're thinking of planting a yucca, just remember that sometimes it could take them up to 5 years before they start getting flowers. And of course, we want to see them come really, really quickly, but they're kind of a flower that has to become established. And then every year it'll keep coming back. We have, I think like 6 of them. They're huge now and they get so many blooms. Hummingbirds are obsessed with these things. There's also the far left picture is going to be your butterfly milkweed, which are those orange flowers. And the butterfly milkweed are actually native to China. Now, native plants, all it really means is that it's a plant that's thrived here over a long period of time. And butterfly milkweed happens to be one that monarch butterflies love. And it's super easy to grow. So this is before and after picture. The spring 2019 compared to, or excuse me, yeah, spring 2019 and summer 2019. That was correct. I thought it was 2018, but it's not. I love before and after pictures a lot, Amy, because it gives you that idea of potential of what something could look like. And when you see this earth that doesn't look like much, but in the springtime, it's still after winter, so most of these things have to come back to life. Most of our plants are dormant in the winter here in Colorado. The only one that is not is the evil crabgrass. It's a joke. That thing and bindweed, that stuff is cold weather and it grows all winter long. To touch base a little bit on pollinators. Pollinators have 3 or 4 stages of life: the egg, the larva, the pupa, and the adult. Insects will look and act differently during these stages. While picking a native garden is important to pick, it's important to plan your selection to accommodate all of these stages. And I talked about that earlier. 2019 was a challenging but very successful year. Several new volunteers joined forces in taking care of the pollinator garden, guided by mentor and master gardener Jessie Standard, who tirelessly committed herself, time, and money to ensure the success of the pollinator garden. Through her leadership, she has inspired several new master gardeners. Sadly, Jessie lost her battle with cancer and passed away January 20th, 2020. She will not be forgotten, and her legacy will continue on through the efforts of the volunteers to further its establishment in the community. If you're interested in learning more or helping, please contact me, Nicole McCrorie, or stop by anytime. We might think we are nurturing our garden, but of course it is our garden that is really nurturing us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. I just want to remind everybody that we are taking questions for Nicole. There's a little Q&A button, a little pop-up down at the bottom of your screen. So please ask your questions. She can answer any kind of questions you can throw at her for now, and if she doesn't know the answer, we'll get back with you. So we are going to take some questions, and while everybody is typing out their questions, I know I had a few that came up, and one of them was, when you're planning for a pollinator garden, what's maybe the most important, like how big does it have to be? Can you do a pollinator garden in a small space, and what's the most important piece of that pollinator garden that you would need?
I would say you could probably have a few things if you had a really small space. Gosh, because I know your space. You have my space, and it's not very big. All you could do is just plant probably a couple things in there that would attract maybe each, or something like, for instance, if you want monarch butterflies, you would plant definitely like the butterfly milkweed would be a good one. And off the top of my head, honestly, I can't even remember which ones are good for their caterpillar stage, which is horrible. I know we have them, but I can't. We have so many over there. We probably have over 70 different flowers over there. I know a lot of them, but I'm still learning. So yeah, little space, anywhere between 2 to 3 feet wide, up to like 5 to 6 feet long. Good.
That's good. That's a good place to start. So what's one of the most important? So you mentioned honeybees as the pollinator. Is that the greatest pollinator, or some other insects that you want to have?
honeybees are going to pollinate, and then the other species of the bees will pollinate, and the numerous types of butterflies will pollinate. Birds help pollinate as well.
Okay.
Where I live in Arvada, I have not been able to get hummingbirds at my townhome to come in, but I would like to.
Okay, so good. We have a couple of questions, and first one is from Julie, and she asks, we are supposed to have nice weather through Mother's Day. Will it be okay to plant my tomatoes now? Which is always a question I have too, so thank you for asking that, Julie.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I would wait until after Mother's Day or Mother's Day and keep an eye on them. If you remember from last year, I'm sure if you planted tomatoes, they might have died from that snowstorm that we did get. So it's a tricky thing to know when to plant them. We were at the garden yesterday and we noticed some people had planted them already, and we're like, ooh, it's not. Yes, it is nice, but the soil gets too cold for them and it'll kill them. So I would wait until at least Sunday or after Sunday, this coming one, the 10th.
Okay, that was good. Good answer. Then I have another question from Jack. It says, do you have Japanese beetles? And if so, how do you deal with them without hurting the pollinators?
Wow, Japanese beetles. You gotta love those guys. Well, we learned a lot about Japanese beetles in our Master Gardener and the insects. And so Colorado is having some exposure to Japanese beetles, and they're hard to deal with. There's pretty much no particular way to get rid of them that we know of right now. There's no pesticides that kill them. And of course, again, you have to be careful with which ones you're using. The things that I've seen that people have tried that are kind of like a myth are those wasps containers where they draw in the wasps, and they'll draw them in, but they find that when they use them, it draws more in. So I don't have an answer for that one, because I think everyone is trying to figure out like what to do with Japanese beetles. 'Cause, yeah.
So if you use the wasp thing to attract or get the Japanese beetles and kill them, it just attracts more to your garden.
Yep.
So interesting. We might have to do some more research on that. So I have another question from Amy, who says, do you take donations of perennials like daylilies, ice plants, or tall bearded irises? I have plants to share when I divide mine in late summer.
Yes, I would absolutely love that.
There you go, Amy. She would love your donations.
Yes.
We'd be happy to hook you guys up.
I would love that. Thank you.
Oh, hey, we have a response to the Japanese beetle from one of our. He says chickens love to eat Japanese beetles. So I guess if you can have chickens roaming around your garden, that helps get rid of them. That's great. Good. We'll have to Google that. Check that out.
Oh, I want some chickens, but can't have them where I'm at.
So we have just, yeah, exactly. We can take just a few more questions, and then I'll wrap up. We'll just take a couple more questions. So last few minutes to get in your question if you have one. Nicole, what would you suggest might be some of the best native plants for us to plant in our gardens right now?
Well, I have a few favorites. I love the yucca a lot. I want more yucca. So yucca's a good one. Any type of columbines. I love columbines. Now, if you're going to have columbines, you can have multiple species of columbines, but keep them separated. Don't plant them together. They don't like to crossbreed with each other. I also love the creeping thyme. And creeping thyme is one of those ground covers, and we planted it in all of the flagstone that you guys saw. It's not only is it taking over because it's kind of filling in the flagstone, but now it has little tiny purple flowers. So pretty. Love that stuff. The butterfly milkweed is awesome. I also learned, though, about that one. You have to be careful where you plant it because it is poisonous to other animals. Like if dogs or goats were to eat it, it's not good for them. And we actually back up to a property that has goats. And we've been throwing some of the butterfly milkweed seeds out there. So no more of that.
Nicole, will you turn your screen share off so we can see your face?
Yeah, definitely.
Your beautiful face bigger. Thank you. So I think the one final question I have for you, Nicole, is that what plants should you avoid? Like what should we avoid planting in our gardens here in Colorado?
Well, if you are inspired to do a native garden, the one thing that you want to avoid are any cross-breeding double-petaled flowers. They don't pollinate. They're not going to get that center where you see all the nectar and the pollen gathering. They're pretty popular. You've seen them, those really big flowers that get huge petals, but they don't have any pollen. So those are the only ones that I would avoid necessarily. I mean, we have a couple roses, but again, those are ones that they're not native, so you have to constantly watch them just to make sure they're okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're almost out of time. It's 2:59. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I'll just want to wrap up. But once again, thank you to Nicole. If anybody needs more information or needs to be able to contact Nicole, reach out to us. We'll see if we can get you guys together, or Amy to get you her plant donations, which thank you for that. That's fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to just remind everybody that we have Tedstrom Talks every week coming up. We also have this is a special week. We have another one coming up on Thursday with Bert White, who is with LPL. He's going to give us some good information on the markets and what he's seeing and on the economy. Also, we've got mental health for COVID coming up, which should be very interesting. So Bert White is this Thursday, May 7th at 1:30. And then the rest of these will come in the coming weeks. Be checking your emails for them. But mental health for COVID. We'll also have Greg Moss from Channel 9, I believe he was. I'm sorry if I messed that up. He'll be speaking with us. He is an innovator. He's the innovator now with Westminster City. And then we also have the plight of the homeless during this time. And that's going to be presented from the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. So there's a couple of really good Tedstrom Talks coming up, and we hope that you can join for those. And, I just think it was fascinating to listen to Nicole talk about planning the gardens and how we can really plan out what we want to do and how some things take time. Some, they're not instant gratification, not put them in the soil and see them sprout up right away, and how some of these things can really correlate with investing in the same way that we don't get our returns maybe the same minute, the same year that we think we should get them, but some things take time over the long haul. We need to stay, put our plan in place, water it, feed it, take care of it, and just let it go and let it grow. So I appreciate everybody joining today, and I hope that you have a great rest of your week and look forward to seeing or talking to everybody on Thursday. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.